Okay, hi guys. We're back again. I'm here with Kale. How are you, mate?
I'm good. I always like the ill-fated strongman podcasts. We were like, we're doing them in like 2 weeks in. It's we had to take like a month break because that's how podcasts go. It's the
For sure.
hardest, easiest thing to do in the world.
Yeah, but we've actually got something relevant right now to talk about because
Yeah.
we've had a competition and it's definitely thrown up plenty of talking points. And that, of course, is the Rogue Invitational Strongman, the third one of its kind. I will start by saying that clearly there was a lot of problems, and we're going to go through this event by event and discuss it. And a lot of it is going to be highlighting where there's issues. However, I went to the first ever Rogue Invitational. I know Jan and Steve who are running the competition, and I know the Hennigers who own Rogue. These are good people that do a lot for the sport. Arnold Strongman Classic, all those guys have been involved for a long, long time and really progressed the sport. The first Rogue Invitational I went to was excellent, really excellent. Of course, there's a few teething problems, but for a first one, it was top class. And we can't forget the money that they're providing. They're putting up for these strong men, which again, for all the problems that there's been, everybody's got paid. So we'll bear that in mind as we go through and look at this. That I think in future, hopefully, they learn from it and they improve. So with that being said, Carol, we kicked off with the deadlift. Bobby Thompson and Trey Mitchell, I think, equal first on that event. What's your thoughts on
Mhm.
that event to begin with?
I don't think the strongman like walking up and down the stairs. Um, you know, Especially like I saw that looked harder for Trey going back down the stairs than doing the deadlift. It's every strongman's worst nightmare is a bunch of stairs. So it's like maybe it could be built into the side of a hill or something, and they have like an elevator. It looks cool, I think, but it seems like the look of it, like there's so much wood around it, you can't really tell what is going on. I like that it's different. I like the idea of it. It's so big, which is cool, but it seems like for how big and how much is going into it, it could look cooler. I like that it's kind of like a little different. It's like on a path, it's not on a,
Mm,
it's almost like lifting in like a Smith machine or something, like,
yeah,
which really threw some of the athletes off. You really have to be patient at the bottom. So overall, I like any event that's going to be different and that the athletes have to adapt. You saw some adapt fine. Looked
yeah,
like everyone's first pull was the hardest for them as they like got that groove, and then some really got into that groove. Evan Singleton just had a really hard time with that groove, and you see some benefit from it, some it throws off, which I think is good for strongman. But I feel like there could be something more. I don't, I don't know what it
yeah,
is, but
yeah. But I feel like you, I like it, and I like what they've done there, and it's kind of in the mold of the Wheel of Pain. However, like you say, there's so much wood and things around it. It's a bit like, what the hell is this thing here? But as an event
mm-hmm.
itself, it's a genuine test. It's a genuine deadlift. The only thing I would say is I'm of the belief that all strongman tournaments should have at least one max lift, and I think the deadlift would have been a good way to kick that off. Having a max deadlift in whatever form it may have been, it could have been with the elephant bar. Maybe that's coming up at Arnold's, but perhaps it was an opportunity to have a max lift in that first event.
Looks like you could easily add a max to that even.
Yeah, for sure. I think for sure you could.
It would take a while. I think you'd have to have them all sitting up on the platform. They're not going to want to go up and down it, but um
Yeah,
uh um which that it's almost kind of like a Ukrainian deadlift a little bit, except it has a full bar.
mm-hmm.
But it could easily be converted into that. Overall, I like it. It looks like they made it a little heavier because people got double digits last year and it was a little light, so that was good. And maybe what 50 pounds or so heavier, and
Yeah.
it seemed like it was at a good weight. Weren't they planning on doing like a max axle? Because I know like some events changed. That wasn't a
Yeah, I mean,
max, so
we'll
that was
we'll
part of
get
a
into that.
medley.
But yeah, there was Axel, which I think was the event people were most looking forward to because we don't see it so much anymore. And yeah,
Yeah.
we'll get to that. Unfortunately, it was pushed out. And of course, just quickly on that, Mateusz came last or joint last. He didn't get a rep. It's kind of what we all know about Mateusz at this point, that he's always going to be in trouble on a deadlift event, and this was no different.
Yeah, and they've definitely the static lifts have seemed to mess with his head more, even though he looked, as we'll get to, in like the traditional old school events, he looked on a complete other level than every other athlete.
Yeah.
Um,
but to zero out on the deadlift again, it's always playing
tough.
catch up, isn't it? And it's always tough from that point. Yeah, so good start, particularly Bobby and Trey, which meant we went into this sled pool. They call it the Iron Ball. Earlier in that day, there'd been a video put out of Brian Shaw there testing it, and there was clearly issues over the weight. And Brian, or between everybody there, had decided they needed to add a rope because it was just too difficult. So there were teething problems in the morning before the event, which is already concerning. Now, Mateusz was first up, and Mateusz was probably always going to be the guy most likely to win that event. He's got a track record of being excellent at those, and sure enough, he did it, but he got it going. However, it kept stopping, which is very unusual for a pull event. Usually, once you get the thing moving, if you've got the strength there, it keeps going. But even Mateusz, stopping, starting, stopping, starting. After that, there was a pretty much pattern of it appearing to be more difficult to get going, even over the first meter or so, where usually you can drop body weight into it, things like that. Now, it was slightly different to other events, pull events that the guys are used to. There's a lot of talk that perhaps there was friction issues, wood on metal, and there was moisture between all the rain, there being dampness. What's your thoughts on it? To your eye, did it look like something was off with the actual equipment?
Well, something was off. It's hard to say if it got harder or, for as the athletes went, because Mitchell Hooper went almost last and still got second in the event. He
Yeah,
did have a different technique.
he was the exception to the rule.
Yeah. So he throws it in there, and he's also the current winning everything guy. So maybe he could just overcome it. But I think using friction, it's very easy to say now, is tough for consistency, especially, I've been out to Texas and Austin a lot for different strongman events, the humidity and the weather can just swing like crazy around there. And when we're talking about wood, like the humidity can throw stuff off, and it changes so quick there. And especially as it goes back and forth, the wood could even heat up on the ramp. Maybe that's going to affect it. I'd say it's a good thing to let's not. I think on a smaller scale, if you're looking from a CrossFit point of view, you have a smaller implement. You're not trying to make it so heavy. It's possible that they thought that this could be done without a rope in the first place. Shows that it wasn't, like, the math wasn't mathing on how they thought. Yeah, it was just a botched event. And what I saw is it was almost like a train track, looked like it was on like a big, like I-beam, kind of rounded metal up there. And they were joined with bolts like at every 15 meters. And it looked at right there where there was that join. I mean, if you're talking about something that heavy and there could just be this teeniest little gap where there's just an edge, it's just going to dig into that wood along the whole way. And it's, it could gouge it. It could change it the whole way. It's one of those events I really wish I could be there just to like look. I think if you're there looking at it, it would make a lot more, you'd be able to see a lot more. But yeah, it needs something like that. It needs to be on some sort of bearing or small wheel with some other resistance built in. It looked kind of cool. I don't think it looks cooler than like a plane or a monster truck or something.
Yeah.
But Rogue can't show that they built a plane, or maybe they can. I don't know.
Yeah, that was kind of my perception, that the pool event in Strongman to me is always probably the best spectacle of all. And I thought that Rogue could create their Rogue lorry, the guys pool, any number of things. I think Rogue could put out there that the guys pool, and they got the space out there. That was the thing for me. It was a format that's not broke a pulling events that they quite easily done.
And to be fair to them, they are a cool event, but there's a long history of vehicle pulls being off at very memorable moments in the sport. Like this isn't a uncommon thing. They're hard to test. The slight, like they could test it here, the slightest incline. I mean, I just had clients at a contest like the other day, and like no one moved the truck at all at like a local level show. And this happens constantly. And they're like, oh, we tested it at the gym. And I'm like, yeah, but at the event, it's a whole different surface. The littlest incline will make it go from doable to impossible. It's really unfortunate Trey got hurt. I hate to see that. I've known Trey since he, you know, just he was right, you know, in amateur level and stuff, and he just looks like he's like just on the cusp of being like, you know, like he's already right there top 5 at every show, but he looks like he's like the cusp of being able to win shows like this, win worlds. Obviously, he's won the Shaw Classic, and that's the takeaway on this. It looked like the track was weird. It was a mess. There's no way to salvage it.
I think that probably single moment is what has done Rogue most damage, is that whether or not there was issues with that event, the fact that Trey got injured and people already thought the event wasn't working right, then it moves into the territory of people like, where you're not thinking about the athletes here and you put them in danger, and that's where I think it's really cost them dear.
Yeah, and you know, there's been torn Achilles on vehicle pulls that work perfectly fine too. It's very strenuous. Like look at the position your body's in on, you know, the little tendon right there. And Trey looked very big this contest too, which sometimes when there's big swings in body weight, you see athletes, sometimes when they lean way down, they get hurt more. Sometimes when they get a lot bigger, you're still getting used to however your leverages are and everything. You know, it's pretty common for there to be a big injury in a sport. It really sucks, especially I think Trey is, you know, his how quiet mannered and just strong and everything he is really becoming a fan favorite, and people hate to see it. I definitely hate to see it. And, you know, to see that he's probably out for a good year and he's going to miss out on, you know, America's Strongest Man's in like next week. And, you know, that is a $25,000 prize money, first place for it. You know, we got, you know, Arnold coming up, all these shows that people want to see him at.
Yeah, I think the best he can hope for is the next Rogue, isn't it?
Yeah, probably. That's a tough one to come back from.
Yeah. I mean, I echo what you say. I'm a big fan of Trey, and having met him as a person, he's a great guy, and just wish him well and wish him a comeback. I spoke to him briefly and wished him all the best. And he seems fairly positive, considering it's just head down and get on with it. He's got great family, great people around him, so I think he will. But yeah, terrible shame, really disappointing. Trey was my pick to win the overall tournament, as you say. He came in big, he came in serious. A great shame. I do think because that pool, because of the fact that even when it had momentum, it would still stop and you had to start again. That's where the real strain went on the Achilles, where every time you're restarting, and that's where it gets worse.
Yeah, it's like the start. Every pull's like the start. That's really hard. Which is good in a way, but it just probably it needed to be a bit lighter, or like grease the tracks, or just some sort of bearing system. I've seen similar setups that had like resistance within the wheels on a bearing, and they worked well. And like you can make it even like I've seen them where they're like, you know, here in America we have these silly things with like monster truck pulls where they pull a sled and it gets heavier as it goes. People do stuff like that, and like that system works. You know, there's different ways to make resistance. It's just this isn't it. And also the attachment point. I was watching this and I rewatched it. Because you notice Mitchell Hooper, he stayed upright and just used his arms and kept his hips, you know, so he was like this, which is contradictory to everything you're supposed to do in a vehicle pull. And you notice Bobby Thompson did this too, which are both coached by, you know, Big Laws. And, you know, he was saying that, you know, on the commentary, go low, but I think he'd text them and be like, hey, I think you got to use your arms, because they both had the similar technique. And if you look at it, the attachment point to me looked really low. So I think it was digging it down into it, where if you're trying to pull it up higher, you know, you're going to not get as much friction if you're elevating it a bit. But
so it was a shame. It did look good, but other than that, it was a mess. Mateusz, great performance still. It shows that he's somewhere back to near where he was. And you've got to give it to Mitchell Hooper. As you say, he was the one guy that didn't follow the order of getting worse and worse. So if there was a problem with it, he was able to overcome those issues with equipment and still get second. So got to give a lot of credit there to those two in particular.
Yeah, and Mateusz said it was like the heaviest thing he's ever pulled. So that tells you something. He's pulled more vehicles than everyone else there probably combined. So
yeah, exactly. And then we went from that event into the arm over arm. What the road call that one? Coaster.
Rouger Coaster.
Yeah, okay. Arm over arm, I call it. But
yeah,
I like an arm over arm in strongman. Takes me back to some of the older days when we had that more often. And I always remember the boat being pulled up out of the water and things like that. It's a good event. I think the kind of distance of it, the time it takes to complete is good. It's heavy enough that there's good separation between athletes' times. It's clear who's really in which order. Mateusz, once again, we know Mateusz for, zero and on the deadlift. There's just some events that he's probably the best we've ever seen in some of these. He's just so far ahead of everybody. And, we can look at the times compared to last year. It's unbelievable how much better he is. So a good showing from him, yeah?
Yeah, he looked incredible. And I like the event, but doing an arm over, going from like a vehicle sled pull to an arm over arm, it's a little strange. They're very similar in a way. But overall, I like the event. It has that roller coaster feel. It's clicking the tracks as you go up. Yep. Gives it like a larger than life look, and it seemed to work fairly well. The Mateusz just absolutely blistered it. 27.95. Next closest was Stoltman at 33.08, and they said Lisi's did it in 31 or 32 previously. Again, he said that was the heaviest arm over arm he's ever done.
Yeah.
Well, he said he trained it heavier in training, but it was hard because you had to every one, it's a dead stop.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a good event. I like the sandbags fall out, probably looks cool in person.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is a good event. It's just it felt subdued after that iron.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, obviously they wouldn't have known that at the time. I do agree with you. It's a bit like one is kind of a standing upright arm over arm almost on the rope, and then you're sitting and doing an arm over arm. But I like the event. I think it's good, and I think that's what Rhodes about. It's a huge piece of equipment, but it's very clear what it is, and it tests the guys in a way that we're able to differentiate fairly who was the strongest.
Yeah, it's a solid one. It looks like, just pretty. Yeah. It looked like Hooper was going to lose it there for a little bit, but he went. He came through. Yeah, he does, and ended up still getting within top 4.
Yeah. Yeah. Then really the weather took over. But here's the thing about the weather. Everybody knew that the weather was coming. I get lots of messages kind of in the week before big tournaments. Probably the main thing people were saying to me is, oh, look at the weather. There's no kind of excuse. There was no surprises about the weather. So as soon as you know it's going to rain from a week before and it's an outdoor tournament, surely you are making contingency plans for that. But it appeared that Rogue, for whatever reason, absolutely did not, it's just kind of bizarre, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and it's also the area. It's not like this is an uncommon thing. There's there's thunderstorms constantly in Texas, and it was in Austin, right? Yeah, over in that area. It's a constant. It's like an everyday thing.
Yeah.
And more and more it seems. So yeah, you need those contingencies, but it's a common theme with the sport, isn't it? Just the weather just messing everything up. We had that, 2020 Worlds where they had to do it. They ended up doing it all inside, and there's a hurricane coming through. There's been a couple of the OSGs recently, people still driving into the eye of a storm as it happens. It's just right. It's just you definitely need contingency plans, because it's not especially when you're in an area that has inclement weather constantly like that.
It's just a question: how did they not, with the experience of the people there running it? It's that's what I can't fathom. How did they not?
I don't know. I didn't pay attention to the CrossFit side. I don't know how they adjusted to that.
Well, I
It
wasn't watching no CrossFit. However, when Thor fought Devon in the boxing, that was when it was the crossover with the top CrossFitters. So I became with some
mhm.
friends with some of these
Josh
CrossFitters at
Bridges.
that time. Yeah, and we're friends on Instagram and all that. Now, those guys were watching my kind of commentary on Instagram about the Rogue, and one of them reached out to me and was just asking a few questions. He was actually asking about the log, which we'll get to in a minute. Um, and he was saying it's a bit of a mess, right? And I said, yeah. And he said, yeah, the CrossFit has been a mess also. So I know a lot of people kind of said, oh, well, the CrossFit, they just care about and don't care about strongman. But
No.
apparently it was across the board. It was just, there were not contingency plans laid for the entire thing.
Yeah, I saw people saying similar stuff about Rogue with Strongman. If they didn't care about Strongman, they wouldn't include it at all. This is something
Yeah,
that they're doing as
exactly.
a passion. They don't need to include it.
Yeah. And there wouldn't
The
be
CrossFit can,
125 grand for the like ring
yeah,
alone.
yeah, they'd give them 10 and people would
Yeah.
still compete.
So yeah, I don't buy that. I think it was just somewhere along the line there was an overall failure in planning. It wasn't someone directing strongman or forget about that sport. It wasn't that.
I think when you have the scale of the implements that Rogue is using, it's harder to have contingency plans too.
Yeah. However, again, just things I can't explain. They then made a decision to drop the fingers and the axle,
Mm-hmm.
and we switched to just log for reps. The axle, I would say, was the event people were most looking forward to. You can quite easily bring an axle indoors in the same venue where they did the log. To me, it
Yeah.
was the guys are trained for that. For certain athletes, very much looking forward to that. Instead, we go for another rep event, and let's be honest, another mess. And this time down to refereeing. It's an age-old topic in strongman refereeing, particularly perhaps in the overhead, but lockouts of any sort. And Mitchell Hooper in particular, and it's not a new story with him, was not getting reprimanded for, let's say, very quick reps that most people would prefer to see under control for a second or two more, and other athletes appeared to be doing so. Athletes can only go by the referee. I think Mitchell was putting it down before he got the down signal, but the referee didn't stop him and say, you're doing that, you can't do it anymore, no rep. He just got on with it. So he didn't do anything wrong, but the refereeing was totally inconsistent through the athletes. And when they're on a time limit and it's for reps, that can be a huge factor. What was your view on it?
Yeah, I just watched it. Like pretty much right before we went on, I went and just looked at that event, and it's the same. I can't even fault Cooper for it because it's the same lockout he's been doing pretty much since he's been in the sport. I saw some explanations that he gets that because, his like Iron Bibby kind of has similar, where it's like up here and, you don't go all the way through, but it's like, regardless of the head through, he was the log was coming down very quick.
The log
And
was going up and rotating down.
yeah,
At no
his like
point
his
was it still there.
they look like training reps.
Yeah.
Like this is how, like, when I have someone and I see them training and they're like, they know their elbow went all the way up and they come back down almost at the same time. I tell them, hold your lockouts for a 2 count to get used to how strongman is judged, because at the Arnold Classic I've seen, with when doing the Austrian Oak or the Feather, they make them hold it for at least 1 or 2 seconds, and there's a lot on the line and he's just doing it. And if you don't get called, keep doing it. I can't, like, for me, I've always liked and, applauded Novikov for doing, kind of that borderline kind of, is it a lockout? Is it, I'm like, hey, he got away with it. He's crafty. And
Yeah.
Mitchell Hooper is very crafty. So I can't talk negatively about him for doing something that I've applauded Novikov for over and over.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just, hey, you can't blame the athlete. The judging needs to be better. And, like, he's the one that took advantage of it. And again, I don't, the strongest or whatever, he seems to be the best at doing a sport
Yeah.
is the thing. And
Yeah.
part of sport is seeing how far you can push it, influencing, people are emotional. I've always said, like, I have a specific thing I send out to clients pre-contest. I say, talk to your judges, make a joke with them when you go up, look at them in the eye, get them excited. And I think everyone likes him.
Yeah.
And not even a fault to them. I think they're just like, this guy's amazing. He is amazing. He does so well. I think they like him. So they're just a little more ready to work with him.
Yeah, and now he's got those titles, Arnold's and Worlds. It's more difficult for referees
Yeah,
that
it gets
are
harder and
susceptible
harder.
to say anything. I totally agree it's on them, but there's a lot of reasons why. But there's a lot of talk that Mitchell's perhaps he certainly divides opinion. Let's put it like that on
Yeah.
popularity. I see quite understandably, there's been a lot of comments on his social media and on Rogues about his reps not being legit, which he has answered back to. Well, of course, then that puts him into arguments with fans. That also doesn't.
There's no reason.
No, but that also, I agree, but that also doesn't help him. And
No.
this is, as we say, it's not his fault. It's the referees causing this problem. But all this becomes a cycle then where fans get disillusioned, and fans automatically are always going to look at the athletes doing it and have a problem with the athlete more than the referee.
Sure. Yeah. People think if someone's cheating, they get irritated at them for cheating. But the point of a sport is to see with how much cheating you can get away with. You're trying to win $126,000.
Yeah.
I'm going to cheat. I've done things in my career where I know, like, I'd wear, like, on a deadlift, I'd wear like black baggier shorts so you can't tell the hip as much. It's just little things. You do it. Like,
But we've got Jan Todd, Steve Slater, Magnus Van Mag, all these people there. I think it was a
they're
different
qualified
referee.
people.
Yeah, these are qualified people that understand, and we've just seen this again. So that's the most disappointing thing. We've got some of the best people there, and it's just still happening.
He had a similar issue on, like, the monster bell at Worlds. Those were, I was just looking at that and I just had to shake my head. That's not something I'd ever call as a down call. What I saw, he's like this, like he's in like a bent press pretty much. But so it's a thing that it's not like one judge is giving him
No.
these calls. It's a cross judging. It's across the sport. It's at Giants Live. It's at Worlds. It's at the Arnold. It's at, different federations. And maybe Marius kind of got this back in the day. You start just blitzing things, and you get that, like in boxing, you get a little bit more credit if you're the champ. It's just he's getting the champ calls.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's just disappointing because it's something that's quite easily fixed with referees there. And as I said before, I said the other day, Big Z there sitting down, try and press overhead like that, and you won't get a single rep. And for me,
and that's how Magnus used to be. I had him referee me at the Arnold Amateur, and everyone was like, crap, I have Magnus in my lane. Because he'd make you, I saw him, one of my friends, he made him like grind out a lockout we counted it was like 12 seconds. He needed to get his hips like, and he's just like, I don't like hitching. He wouldn't even told us, he's like, I don't like hitching. I don't like any of this. And it just seems like, as the sport's gotten more popular and there's so much more on the line to like get more records, get, the champ's the champ or whatever. It seems like some of these judges that were known as being hardline, like I would say Z is, have got a little more relaxed.
Yeah.
So
we went from that event, KO, into the final event, which was the loading race. Just one thing before we get to that. Mitchell Hooper, as the overall leader, kept getting to go last, which obviously is always the great advantage on every event. What do you think of that format as opposed to it to being the winner of the last event? Because obviously that makes it even harder then for everybody to catch up to the leader, and this case was Mitch.
I'm pretty sure that is a crossover from CrossFit. So they're running it similar. Overall, I'm not a fan of it. Because you know what, it kind of makes it for a more boring contest. Like, because I think CrossFit really, they have longer events. Like they do more events. Like this is only 5 events. I know it's supposed to be 6, right?
Yeah.
But like, I don't like with just 5 events. CrossFit will do like 12, 15 events over a weekend. So it's more like a test of endurance. And if you can be that consistent the whole time, you're rewarded more for it. And they're also not usually doing it individual. There's going to be like 5-10 people in the last heat. So it's not as big of a deal if you go last. So I think it's something that doesn't transfer over. I am a fan of the event winner being rewarded for it. Cause then it's like, when you go last every time, it's so easy to just chip at what you need to do. It's such an advantage.
Especially when it's events for reps. It's not a max. We didn't have a max in it. Okay? I need 8 reps to get this many points, and if I can do 9, and I mean,
or something like he put his shoe down on the sled pole to know he needed right where he needed to go. Like same thing.
Yeah.
And he looked like his head was going to pop off doing it. So he like, but yeah, I'm just not I'm not a fan of that format. Then going into the duel was one of the stranger events I've.
So the final event, they've had the last 2 years, the Invastones, which is a great event, a variation
awesome.
of the Invastones. Great event. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. A great event. And they put on loading 3 sandbags, which were, I don't know, 5 meters from the thing they were going to throw it in, where the winner was going to finish in 20 seconds and everybody around that time. And apparently they were told there would be a 3, 2, 1 countdown and then a buzzer, and then that's when you go. But at the same time in the stadium, on the loudspeaker, the guy was shouting 3, 2, 1, go. Mitchell Hooper went on the go. Mateusz saw him go and quickly went. Everybody else waited for the buzzer to go and went. 20 seconds later, Mitchell had loaded it all up. 25 seconds later, about everybody had thrown 3 sandbags. It was probably the most underwhelming final event for a major strongman competition I can remember.
Yeah, and also I watched it like 3 times right now just because it was so hard. It was so quick. The camera angles were not great to see what was going on. And like I'm looking, it says like 17 and a half seconds was first place here, and last was like 23.38. The sandbags were not heavy enough, the distance was not long enough for anything to be really decided on other than who's best at transitions and timing the announcement, which I saw Hooper go on the 1 when I watched it. But
here's the thing,
it's hard to know when that 1 was, or like when the
here's the thing about
like,
that. When I was there, I remember the tannoy system echoing around that stadium. I know the Stoltmans put out a video from the crowd, one of their crew filmed, and it was like 3, 2, 1, and Mitchell was running. If you watch that same on the Rogue, it goes 3, 2, 1, go, and then Mitchell goes. I believe that discrepancy was because the tannoy is echoing around. I think he went on the go, but he was supposed to anyway go on the beat. But again, I blame this on the organizers. You can't have a guy shouting 3, 2, 1, go, and then a tannoy system, and it's just another kind of unbelievably poorly thought out event.
It seems like they should have done that and then done like a max axe. Like there should have been like it seemed like, is it over? It was just very strange. And again, the 3, 2, 1 go thing, I'm pretty sure is another thing from CrossFit that doesn't transfer over to shorter strongman events, because the CrossFit, there's shirts everywhere, 3, 2, 1 go. That's how it's said to start it. But if you're doing a 15-minute event, who cares if someone went on the 1 or the go? It's going to be pretty minimal consequences. But if the spread of the event is like 4 seconds between 10 points and 2, it could be everything.
And I will go on.
Yeah, but like Hooper did something very smart. He was the only person that went and picked up the implements and then turned to go with them, where everyone went around them. And that's something I've always said, like on kegs, you go to the side or in front and turn if it's a very short, quick thing like that. And he was very, very smart with it.
It was almost surreal to go from such over-engineered events to the most basic.
Yeah. It's something anyone could put together in a gym, just on a whim on a training day.
Yeah. Okay, Kev. So I think overall thoughts is a lot of things went wrong, but Rogue still do a lot of good things for the sport, a big prize money, and they'll be back. Yeah.
Yeah, and my takeaway is we talked the other week that the Shaw Classic, is it the best event or not? Events like this make it really cement that like the Shaw Classic has a lot to gain because they,
I
you know,
agree.
the whole caring about the athletes. He's not going to put an Iron Bull out there. At least he hasn't done it yet. That doesn't work like that.